Disclaimer: I doesn't claim any of the arts. All the picture shown belongs to the respective artist and company. If you are original owner and want me to remove the video, I will do it immediately. Just send me an email to inform me. And if you liked my content, please subscribe to the channel. Chapter begins and we see that in the Empire's military, soldiers were nearly indestructible as long as their heads and chests remained intact. As long as they could breathe and their brains received blood, the Empire could revive them using advanced cybernetic technology. This capability made the Empire's soldiers formidable opponents on the battlefield. Kodrak approached Luca, who gave him a cold, piercing stare. Luca ordered Kodrak to speak his mind, and Kodrak explained that he was aware of Luca's exceptional abilities. Kodrak always made it a point to assess the skills of his superiors, and he knew Luca was particularly skilled. However, Kodrak asked Luca to listen to his advice during battles, given his 10 years of service to the Empire. Even though Kodrak might not be as skilled as Luca, he believed his experience was valuable. Luca reassured Kodrak that he would consider advice from anyone if it was good. Kodrak thanked him for his willingness to listen. Soon after, the platoon transport arrived at the rebel army's position. One of the transports opened, and soldiers clad in full-body mechanical armor, known as the Myrmidon models, began to disembark. Luca viewed them as mass-produced mechanical soldiers designed to destroy the rebel turrets, allowing the rest of the army to advance safely. The commanding officer gave the order to initiate the attack. The Myrmidons activated their thrusters and flew toward the rebel position, encircling it from all sides. The rebel turrets powered up and fired at the armored units. In response, the Myrmidons launched small missiles to deflect the attacks. Some Myrmidons were destroyed, but others survived and continued firing missiles at the rebel position. A massive explosion enveloped the area in thick smoke, but the protective barrier around the site remained intact, and the turrets continued firing. The Myrmidons dodged the attacks and moved closer, using their melee weapons to strike the barrier and create cracks. Boosting themselves with their thrusters, they broke through the barrier. Luca was surprised to see the barrier destroyed, but the turrets were the Myrmidons' primary target. If they failed to destroy them, the rest of the army would be at a disadvantage. According to the simulator's calculations, the Myrmidons had 1 minute after breaking in to take out the turrets. If they failed, the main suppression force would have to march forward and suffer heavy losses. As expected, the turrets were destroyed. Everyone celebrated, and Luca noted how even on a cruel battlefield, moments of joy could be found. He enjoyed the sense of accomplishment because without it, he believed he would have lost his mind long ago. After the celebration, Luca ordered his men to move out. It was time to test his abilities. The plan was for the infantry to attack from all sides simultaneously. The Empire didn't want to leave any escape routes for the rebels. The underground tunnels of the arcane fortress were like a maze, stretching hundreds of meters deep. The Imperial Army had maps from earlier expeditions, but the rebels had altered the layout, making the maps unreliable. The soldiers marched forward as explosions echoed around them. Luca noticed that the tunnel entrances had been narrowed to prevent the Myrmidons from entering. He and his team entered the tunnels and carefully explored the area. Luca declared that he would take command. Kodrak warned him that it was a risky move, as the tunnels were likely filled with traps or ambushes. Luca asked if Kodrak was worried of what might happen if he died, and Kodrak admitted he was. However, Luca didn't care about Kodrak's concerns. He ordered the group to follow him. As Luca led the way, he felt a chill run down his spine. He suspected that some of his men might be ready to turn on him, but he pushed the thought aside. His main goal was to find Lillian and eliminate her before Ile could reach her. Luca knew Ile had entered through another tunnel and would likely make it through quickly, even at the cost of soldiers' lives. Luca could have done the same, but he refused to let his personal feelings risk the lives of loyal troops. Instead, he chose to take all the risks himself. When Luca got distracted, a trap was triggered above his head. Kodrak yelled out to warn him about it, and Luca quickly reacted, cutting through the trap with ease thanks to the Ari Victima. Luca had pushed his senses to their peak. He could even taste the chemicals in the air, which helped him gather information. Luca ran through the tunnels, bouncing off the walls. The soldiers following him couldn't believe their eyes. Luca felt his heart pounding harder, his blood rushing fast and delivering energy to his brain. The pressure made him feel sharper and also pushed him to his limits. He grew frustrated at how slow his team was and felt the urge to punch Kodrak. He already understood the risks of using Ares Victima, but now he was feeling it firsthand. The combat method was indeed damaging his brain over time. Finally, Luca reached a door at the end of the tunnel. Inside, rebel soldiers were preparing for an attack. Luca kicked the door hard, sending it flying into one of the rebels. The other rebels froze in shock as Luca stormed in. They quickly grabbed their weapons and aimed at him. Luca drew his sword. The rebels opened fire, but Luca blocked every bullet with his sword. Seeing an opening, he dashed forward, dodging the gunfire. He slashed one rebel's neck and then kicked the severed head at another rebel, blinding him. Luca took the chance to finish that rebel too. The last rebel fired a bazooka at Luca. Luca sliced the flying rocket in half, causing it to explode harmlessly to the sides. The final rebel broke into a cold sweat as Luca emerged from the smoke, looking unstoppable. Unable to fight back, the rebel was killed. Kodrak and the other soldiers finally caught up, only to see the destruction Luca had caused. They stood there, frozen, as they took in the bloody scene. The battle began with a fierce attack by the rebels. Luca and his team quickly found cover behind a wall to avoid the hail of bullets. In front of them, the rebel army stood firm, defending their position. Luca peeked over the wall, observing the enemy troops. He thought, "It's surprising to see such a large underground space. They must have been preparing their defenses here." Luca pulled out a drone from his gear and activated it. As it flew into the air, he thought, "I'm deep inside now. It shouldn't be hard to catch up with the nobles who are trying to escape." The drone started sending back video footage. Luca analyzed it carefully. The rebels have about 100 soldiers. Behind them, I see people who aren't soldiers running away. Lillian might be among them. Just then, Kodrak, who was wearing full combat armor, turned to Luca. "Sir, our team is moving faster than the others. Shouldn't we wait for them to catch up?" Kodrak was concerned about leaving the other squads behind. Luca kept watching the enemy lines, thinking about Kodrak's suggestion. "It makes sense to wait," he thought. "But my brain is tired from using Ari's combat method too much." Suddenly, a gunshot echoed in the distance. Luca's sharp senses picked up the sound immediately. His expression turned serious. "That shot wasn't aimed at us." He noticed a commotion among the rebels. "There's a disturbance in the back. That means another team has arrived at the same time as us. The only person who would rush ahead like this is Ile." Seeing an opportunity, Luca shouted, "They're distracted. Let's move in." His soldiers charged forward quickly. Two heavily armored soldiers moved to the front, raising their shields to block the incoming bullets. Luca followed closely behind, watching as the enemy fire started to crack the shields. One of the shield bearers turned his head and shouted, "Sir, these shields won't last more than a few seconds." He was worried they would soon be exposed. Luca didn't change his plan. "Not yet. Wait," he said firmly. He positioned himself behind the shields, preparing for the right moment. He covered his face and calculated his next move. "The biggest threat is any weapon that can kill me with one shot. They have about 8 powerful weapons. I'll strike when most of them are reloading." As expected, the rebels started reloading their heavy artillery. Luca's eyes narrowed. "Now," he shouted. He jumped into the air and yelled to his team, "When they focus on me, spread out and find cover." He wanted them to be safe. Kodrak's eyes widened in shock. "Sir, you're in mid-air." Luca used his armored limbs to deflect the bullets. His mind worked fast, planning every move. "Handguns and rifles are no match for me. These weak attacks can't hurt my limbs." He drew his pistol and aimed carefully. "I'll take out the weapons that pose the greatest threat to me." His shots hit their marks, and explosions erupted as the powerful weapons were destroyed. Luca landed right in the middle of the enemy formation. "They won't be able to shoot freely if I'm among them," he thought. Before the rebels could react, he unsheathed his sword. In a swift, brutal strike, he cut down the first enemy in his path. Blood sprayed everywhere as chaos erupted among the rebels. "Now I'm unstoppable," Luca thought, feeling powerful. A loud explosion shook the battlefield. One of the rebel soldiers dropped his weapon in fear and raised his hands. I surrender." Seeing their comrade give up, the rest of the rebels followed suit, fear written across their faces. Luca's team moved swiftly, securing the prisoners. Luca turned to Kodrak and ordered coldly, "Kodrak, restrain the rebels." Kodrak nodded. "Yes, sir." As Luca walked forward, he was met with a grim sight. The ground was littered with the bodies of fallen Imperial soldiers, their black armor stained with blood. Luca knelt beside one of the dead soldiers and checked for a pulse. His expression darkened as he assessed the situation. These men are from Ilei's platoon, so they were tasked with attacking from the rear. Ilei is pushing forward too fast, sacrificing his men without giving them time to regroup. Luca looked toward the path Ilei's team had taken. His face was filled with anger, and his eyes glowed red with frustration. Is he so desperate that he's willing to throw away the lives of his own men? Damn it, Ilei. Lilian Ronis. He was torn by conflicting emotions. I want to help Ilei, but I'm still a soldier of the Empire. Choosing one means betraying the other. This situation infuriates me. If I meet Lilian Ramones, I must kill her on the spot. I don't mind Ilei hating me if it stops him from becoming a traitor. I can at least spare his life for now. I'll follow him. Rising to his feet, Luca studied the passage Ilei's team had taken. He turned to Kodrak and issued his command. "Kodrak, continue arresting more of them until another platoon arrives. Once you all regroup, I'll leave the decisions up to you." From behind, Kodrak called out, "Sir." Luca turned, his expression unreadable, as Kodrak looked at him sincerely. "You are an excellent soldier. Your combat today wasn't just incredible, it was shocking." Luca's eyes narrowed. "I don't need empty praise." Kodrak interrupted, "But you have a major flaw as a commander." Luca's face darkened. "If I weren't your commander, we would have suffered greater losses than we currently have. We've made plenty of contributions, so what's the issue?" Kodrak held his ground. "Because you never led your men. You broke through obstacles solely with your own capabilities. Relying on such methods doesn't make you a good commander." Luca's frustration flared up. "I only did so because of your inferior capabilities. You would never be able to understand my proper command or fighting methods. I could scoff at the sight of your useless lot, whining that I didn't make use of you." Kodrak remained firm. "A day will come when you will need the help of those weaker than you, sir. You cannot remain the strongest forever." Luca turned his face away, lifting a hand dismissively. "You may feel free to jeer when that happens, Kodrak. You can say, 'See, I was right.'" From behind, Kodrak simply replied, "I'll keep that in mind, platoon leader Luca." As Luca reached the other side of the passage, he paused momentarily and spoke, his tone lower but resolute. "However, I will keep the advice of my first adjutant in mind. If I come to see that my current method is wrong, I will surely recall your words when I reevaluate my strategy." Kodrak watched as Luca disappeared into the shadows of the passage, his grip tightening around his helmet. I never knew such an ego could coexist with an openness to flexible thinking. Placing his helmet over his chest in respect, Kodrak murmured, "I wish you the best, Luca." Luca sprinted forward at full speed, his boots echoing against the scorched walls of the war-torn corridor. Empty bullet casings littered the ground, mingling with the lifeless bodies of nobles who had taken up weapons. Hands, once accustomed to luxury, were now stiff in death. They had fought to buy time, but their efforts had been futile. Similar battles must be unfolding in the adjacent corridors. The suppression forces had entered in full, systematically wiping out the remaining rebels. Yet, despite the brutality of the battlefield, one thought remained at the forefront of Luca's mind. It sounds corny to say it out loud, but Ilei isn't just someone I trust in battle. He's my friend. The first person my age with whom I could exchange deep thoughts on equal footing. As he advanced, Luca's gaze swept over the fallen Imperial soldiers, their black armor marred with blood. His jaw tightened. "Ilei, you are throwing away soldiers of the Empire for your personal motives. They wouldn't have had to die. An ordinary platoon would never have risked their men to chase the rebels." A flicker of an image flashed in Luca's mind. Ilei pulling Lilian along with him. His fists clenched as he continued his thoughts. "Even if you reach her, how will you get her out? In the end, she will die. That's inevitable. I understand that she is a woman you once loved, but you don't need to die alongside her. You're being consumed by your emotions." A sudden cry rang through the corridor. Luca stopped in his tracks, his eyes flicked downward, narrowing at the sight of a wounded noble with silver hair. The man gasped, I surrender. I am of the Ramones. Luca stared at him, his expression cold. I don't care whether you surrender or not. Do you know where Lillian went? The man gulped, his voice shaking. I don't know which way the heiress went. Luca's gaze sharpened, his iris shifted to the sides, a classic reaction when someone is lying. Without hesitation, Luca pressed his thumb hard against the man's eye socket. The noble screamed in agony, thrashing under Luca's grip. What are you doing? I said I surrender. Stop. What are you? Luca's voice was devoid of emotion. Your final chance. Which way did Lillian Ramones run off to? The noble gasped through the pain. Down. She probably went down. Luca's eyes narrowed. Down? You need to ascend in the end if you want to escape. Is there another route leading up? I don't know. They didn't tell indirect family members like me the details. Luca applied more pressure, his grip unrelenting. Have you seen Ile Karthika? I did. He's the one who did this to me. He's lost it. We knew each other, but even as we surrendered, The noble's words cut off into a garbled scream as Luca pressed down harder, and a sickening pop. Blood spattered across the ground as the man's eye ruptured. Luca stood up, barely sparing the whimpering figure a glance as he walked away. You would have been executed anyway. You're better off like this than undergoing the torture that awaits the rest of your family. I don't typically feel guilty about killing people, but today I feel particularly numb. I guess this is what the battlefield does to you. As he reached the end of the tunnel, distant screams and gunfire echoed closer. His heartbeat quickened, but not from fear. This is it then. A shadow emerged, a pale hand extended into the dim light, gripping a pistol. Ile, if you cross the road of no return, what should I do then? On the other side of the tunnel, standing firm with twin pistols in hand, was Ile, waiting. And with that, this chapter ends. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Support this channel by liking this video and subscribing the channel. And if you want me to recap another manhwa or manga, write its name on comment section. And if you want to know what happened in previous chapter, you can watch them in this YouTube channel.